My name is Bre O'Handley. I'm a psychology Ph.D. student at Trent, and I belong to Traill College. To be honest, I kind of chose Trent because of my supervisor, Dr. Catharine Blair. She was my undergrad supervisor when I did my honors thesis at St. FX University on the East Coast. I took a few years off after my undergrad to kind of work and be in the world, and then when COVID happened, I thought this is a great time to go back to school. And Dr. Catharine Blair was here, and there's not many people in Canada doing LGBTQ psychology research. If you wanted to do grad studies with somebody doing that kind of research, it's pretty difficult to find. And so luckily Trent was one of those places that had a lab that's doing that kind of research. My master's research and a paper that kind of came out of that research, we found that transgender and non-binary people were experiencing more psychological distress and less social support than other LGBTQ people, so LGBTQ people who weren't trans or non-binary, but also less than cisgender and heterosexual people during the pandemic. And in that study, we asked people to kind of type in a response and tell us, like, how has your identity been relevant? Like, what do you think are some unique experiences that you're maybe having during the pandemic because of your LGBTQ identity? And so people talked about how that was a pretty distressing experience for them. So there were a lot of different factors that might have played a role. And when it comes to reduced social support, a lot of our participants talked about feeling really disconnected from the LGBTQ community generally, but also just people who are affirming of their identity. So maybe friends who aren't LGBTQ or family that aren't, but are really supportive of their identity and accept them for who they are. Doing this research in my master's, really, it highlights those minority stressors, that experience of stigma, and how that's related to negative mental health outcomes. And that's important. I think that's an important part of research that we need to maintain in LGBTQ psychology. But I think through doing that research, I got really interested in the idea of positive psychology and how to kind of apply that to LGBTQ psychology as well. The LGBTQ community has a really complicated history with the field of psychology. You know, prior to the 1970s, being LGBTQ was considered a mental disorder, and we still see that these sentiments exist even in research. I think a really cool thing about research, if it's done properly, is that it has the ability to shift our cultural narratives. And so we've seen this in the past with LGBTQ psychology, kind of as I was saying before, that, you know, up until a certain point, people thought that being LGBTQ was a mental disorder and that LGBTQ people were simply mentally unwell. And so that shifted when research and also activists kind of came out and they said, no, it's about the experience of being LGBTQ in our society and the discrimination and the harassment that people face. You know, that's why we're seeing these mental health disparities. I think focusing on queer joy as well is a really important aspect of this conversation.